Hey guys, I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. The latest book in the Deikan series, Volume 3, is now out. If you'd like to learn more about some of Japan's most haunted and dangerous spots, then this is the book for you. You can find all sorts of abandoned shrines, hospitals, parks, and even lesser-known places you wouldn't even think could be haunted. That's Deikan, the most haunted locations in Japan, Volume 3, out now. This week, we're heading to Japan's northeast for a selection of stories from the Tohoku region. Many consider this area of Japan to have some of the oldest, richest lore in the country, but also the most terrifying. First up, a man who works at a company dealing in photographs for important ceremonies gets a strange request from some bereaved parents. They want a wedding photo for their recently passed son. It's tradition in the area, after all. But what's really going on here? Find out in Musakari. These days, I work for a large design agency, but after I left technical school, I worked part-time at a company specializing in editing photos for important family ceremonies that my school recommended. For funerals, we scanned people's faces from snapshots and then edited them to be in a suit for their funeral portraits. And for weddings, we mostly did general corrections and such. Other than that, it was mostly odd jobs unrelated to photos. For the funeral of a young man in his 20s, I took part in the selection of the photo from his family album to use for his funeral portrait. But after that, his parents, who I think were in their 60s, stopped me and made a strange request. They said they wanted me to make a wedding photo for their deceased son. He died of illness before getting married, and they felt so bad for him that even if it was fake, they hoped they could at least have a photo of him in a wedding ceremony. Well, whether I could do it or not depended on if they had all the necessary images. But this wasn't the sort of work we usually did at our company, so I was unable to give them an immediate answer. I then spoke to one of the permanent employees about the request. "Ah, that's for Musakari," he said. "It's customary for men in the Tohoku area who die before getting married to have a fake wedding picture made that they then give to a temple or shrine. It's called Musakari. That's probably what they want. I thought that custom had died out, but I guess it's still around. Well, as a company, we can't take that on, but you're free to do it in your own time as an individual. Although I wouldn't recommend it." Seeing how much pain the father was in, and how earnestly he made the request, and how much his mother cried at the funeral, I decided to take on the job. After talking to the parents, they said they had a photo of the deceased groom in hakama with his family crest from his coming-of-age ceremony, so we decided to use that. Then, his parents also dressed up for a brand new shoot. The idea was to have his parents on either side, with the groom and his bride in front of a gold leaf folding screen. Now, the problem was the bride. I thought that I would make a collage using different facial features from various photos to create a bride in traditional Japanese clothing. That way, the woman wouldn't be someone who actually existed. However, the parents presented me a single sheet of printed paper with a photo on it and asked me if I could please use that. They were insistent that they really wanted this woman to be the bride. It would have been easy enough to scan it, but then I remembered what my colleague told me. According to tradition, the Musakari votive tablet must not use the photos or real names of anyone living for either the bride or groom, although the attendees and such are fine. if either of the couple is an actual living person, then they would then be welcomed to the underworld. It might sound silly, but they say there are still shrines in the Tohoku area who have the power to make such a thing happen. Nervously, I asked them if it was okay to use the photo of someone who was still alive. However, they said the woman in the photo was dead. She had been engaged to their son while they were still alive. It seemed their son got sick after she died, and seeing as both were already deceased, they were probably already together on the other side. However, the neighbours and such would be happy to hear that there was an official ceremony for them, and while I was still a little suspicious, I finally agreed to it. They paid me 100,000 yen for the job. With the photo done, I put the son's name, as well as the name the parents told me for the woman, with his surname, on a panel that would be easy to put on a votive tablet, and handed it to the parents. I was pretty satisfied with the end result. The parents also seemed happy, and they said they were going to take it back to their hometown. I was a little surprised because this town was in the prefecture that my colleague had mentioned, but I didn't think too deeply about it. 2 weeks later, there was an accident printed in the local paper. A woman was hit by an ambulance in front of a hospital and died instantly. It created all sorts of problems for the area. The hospital was the same one that son's body had been taken to, and although there was no photo of the person who died, they did print the woman's name. It was the same as the one the parents gave me for that wedding photo. Next, a young man's family keeps a rather odd object in their storehouse. An object with a long and very important history. An object he must never touch. But why? What's really inside this strange thing? Find out in Mago. This is a story about when I lived back in our family home, in the mountains of a certain prefecture in Tohoku. It seemed our family were rather large landowners in the area, and everyone always sucked up to my grandfather so much that I hated it. Honestly, I didn't really like our home all that much. So, our house had a storehouse. I heard that it wasn't used to store family heirlooms or anything like that, but rather they kept tributes in there from various places. One of them that was treated as especially precious was a ball. I had no idea what it was meant to be used for, but it was a dark metal, I don't know what type, with no patterns or anything else on it. When you shook it, it made a rattling sound. When I did this as a kid, my grandfather hit me so hard I nearly spat up blood. I had no idea what it was, but when I asked, my family just said, "It's very important. Don't touch it." It wasn't like I'd be cursed or anything if I did touch it, but according to my grandfather, there's a mago, a grandchild, inside. We don't know when it will be born, so don't provoke it. It seemed this story had been passed down through the generations of our family, so it seemed it was connected to that. My father knew about it, but I didn't, so I thought it was a little creepy, but that was about it. Later, I heard from my father that the mago was like an indigenous god in the area. Normally, indigenous gods lived in that particular area, but the mago were special, and they were kami-samas that the villagers brought with them when they moved here. That made the people who brought them the first generation of their family lines. But my father had no idea why it was called a mago, why it was inside a strange ball, or what it meant that it would be born. So, last summer, my grandfather died of a heart attack. Neither my father nor I lived there anymore, so there was no one to take over the household, meaning there was no head of the house. We then returned for his funeral. Suddenly, I was curious about that ball. To be honest, I was curious about it ever since I moved out. So, I went to the storehouse. When I got there, I found the ball was broken. It was split cleanly in two. And now that it had split, I saw for the first time that the ball was made of wood. Inside, I could see the wood grain, and the outside seemed to be painted. Of course, it wasn't very heavy, and when I picked it up, it was actually rather light. When I picked it up as a child, however, it most definitely held the weight of metal, meaning the mago must have weighed quite a bit. A chill ran down my spine, and I ran out of the storehouse. About 6 months after his funeral, I heard that quite a few people had died in that village. People were saying it was a curse or something, but I didn't think that was the case. I mean, it's a little odd that the mago would be born right after the head of the household died. Ah, my grandfather must have been enough, I thought. I have no idea what was born from that ball, but I don't plan on going back there, so I guess I don't really need to know. If you ever find yourself going to the Tohoku region though, be careful. You never know what you might find out there. A group of friends head to the northeast to see an incredibly strange and terrifying ritual in a village in the middle of nowhere. But will they be able to come back alive? Find out in Village Where the Dead Walk. This summer, I visited a village about a 2-hour walk from the station with some friends. Apparently, this was a neighbouring village to where one of them lived as a child, and when he was younger, he once saw an incredibly strange tradition there that he could never forget. Because we loved scary stories, he invited us to go back there with him. So, apparently this tradition involved the dead walking around outside. It sounded like a movie, but it seemed interesting, so of course, we decided to go. We thought that maybe he just misremembered what happened, but it seemed that wasn't the case. It was pretty dark, so it was hard to see, and the village was quite some distance away. The area was rapidly depopulating, and the only people still there were the elderly, so we had nowhere to spend the night. We ended up asking the local police officer if we could stay there, and it was from there that we watched. There were no streetlights. It was dark, and they were pretty far away, but we saw them. They didn't walk like zombies though. They looked rather normal, but they were silent. Dead people who didn't realize they were dead were walking around outside. If we also went outside, then they'd take us away too. Of course, there were people who didn't believe this and went outside, but then they never came back. Those who did believe it were too scared to go out and could only wait inside until morning. But in the morning, there was never anything there. But then, during the next March of the Dead, those missing people could be spotted amongst them, the police officer said. We were so scared that we couldn't go outside. We couldn't even sleep that night. I was too shocked to ask for more information, but I wonder if anyone here knows more. This was the Tohoku region, by the way. Two friends on their way home from a skiing trip stumble across something odd, and quite frankly, terrifying, in the dark, snowy countryside. It appears to be a ritual, but why and what for? Find out in Old Folks Around the Hole. I was on my way back home from a skiing trip with my friend. It was after 3 a.m. and we were driving down a village road somewhere in the Tohoku area. We didn't know the area very well, and there were no streetlights, so both of us were rather anxious as we drove down the dark street. The fields on both sides of the road were covered in snow, so it was pure white out there. Then, suddenly, an old man came running towards us from the side of the road, holding a bamboo torch. He was screaming something. The strange expression on his face scared me, but I decided we should hear what he had to say, so I stopped the car and put down the window. He spoke in a dialect, so it was hard to make out, but from his angry tone, he seemed to be telling us not to go any further. I didn't exactly feel like turning back after coming this far, so I asked him why. But the old man simply repeated that we shouldn't go any further. Then another old man holding a bamboo torch appeared out of the snowy field as well. I didn't want him to say the same thing, so we simply took off. However, the road ended shortly after that. I slammed on the brakes, but there was nothing in the headlights. It was honestly just pitch black ahead of us. We got out of the car to see what was going on, and what we saw was unbelievable. It was an absolutely massive hole in the snowy field. It was like a crater, but there was no snow whatsoever inside it, so it seemed to be freshly made. A shrine gate had been erected at the bottom, and numerous elderly people holding bamboo torches stood around it. It was like they were carrying out some sort of ceremony. A bad feeling washed over both of us, so we rushed back to the car and sped down the road we'd just come from. Several elderly people glared at us from the side of the road as we passed, and honestly, I broke out in a cold sweat. We passed over a mountain and found ourselves in a town with streetlights, and it was only then that my friend and I finally spoke again. We returned to that same village during the day a few days later to see just what that hole was, but it was gone, and there was no break in the road either. The only thing we could find was a sign announcing they were building a golf course there soon. A man driving home from a business trip in Fukushima fears the worst when he feels an impact on the road late at night. But did he, perhaps, run into something else? Find out in Traffic Accident. I work at a real estate agency, and this last March I went to Fukushima for work. After dropping off a client, I thought I'd have a look around before heading back to Tokyo, so I started driving down the dark night roads along the coast. Before I knew it, two young boys, I guess they were elementary school kids, suddenly ran out onto the road and hit my car. Bang! There was a sudden impact, and for a moment, I froze. Oh no, I thought, and honestly, I debated whether I should just keep driving or not. But in the end, I decided to alert the police. I was honestly too scared to get out of the car to see if they were okay or not, so first I contacted my boss, and then I called the police. At first, the officer I spoke to was clearly panicking, but then, as I explained what happened, he audibly calmed down. I was more upset than he was, so he spoke slowly and deliberately to calm me down. Then, once I was done explaining what happened, again he spoke to me slowly Did you really hit someone? Huh? I thought. He wasn't making any sense, so I replied, yes, I did. The officer told me to check, so nervously, my phone still in hand, I stepped out of the car. I couldn't find any signs that the car had hit anything, nor could I see any people around. In the dark, I searched with my phone light for about 10 minutes, but there was zero sign that I'd even hit anything. What's going on? I asked the officer, astonished. He said incidents like this were quite common after the earthquake. On some days, they got as many as 20 calls just like this one. He said that at this late at night, especially nowadays, there wouldn't be anyone near the coast. But at any rate, he took my license number and then told me to quickly go home. A hunter fears that a bad harvest is going to make for a tough winter, so he decides to go against hunting rules and set up a trap to catch some meat. But bad weather throws a wrench in those plans, and it seems that an old foe also returns to make the man question his future life choices. Find out why in Box Trap. Maybe this story isn't very scary, but it left a deep impression on me. It's the tale of a former Matagi hunter who lived in the mountains on the border of Akita and Iwate prefectures. This old man was an expert char fisherman, and he loved fishing so much that even on days where he didn't have to go out, he still went fishing anyway. But these days, he no longer fishes. This is why. One day, he caught a huge char in a deep pool that was about 40 centimeters long and missing one eye. However, just as he was about to bring it in, the line snapped and it got away. Upset, the old man swore that he would get his revenge and catch it again some other day. Time passed and summer arrived. The weather was unseasonably bad, and the locals feared that this year was going to be their worst harvest yet. The hunter, who lived half off his hunting profits and half off farming, also knew that this year's harvest would be a bad one. And so, he came up with a plan. He would take down a few bears and sell them for money to help prepare for the bad harvest. However, it was no longer the hunting season, and so it was forbidden to head into the mountains with his rifle. As such, he decided to secretly set up a box trap with drums attached. He set up this handmade box trap just off the forest path in the valley where he lost that large char. However, a heavy rain fell shortly after that and flooded the valley. The rain continued for several days, and muddy brown water flooded down the mountain. The valley was rather narrow, and being that the box trap was made of steel, he figured it wouldn't get washed away. However, if there was a bear in it, then it would undoubtedly drown. It was irresponsible, and he also felt bad for the potential creature. Thinking about how he'd have to clean it up after, he felt terrible. Once the rain stopped, suddenly the sun came out. Shining brightly, all the areas that had just been flooded quickly dried out. As such, it was time to head out and deal with the mess. The old man had left his box trap out there for several days. But it wasn't over yet. Not only could he not get the box trap out of his mind, but when he thought about how someone might have seen him setting the trap without permission, he began to grow worried. When he arrived at the valley, he was greeted by a terrible smell as he got closer to the trap. So he did catch a bear then, huh? Holding his breath, he opened it and found a massive bear, bigger than any he'd ever seen before, inside. He'd honestly never seen one so large. He was filled with regret. As bothersome as it was, he should have come out to deal with it sooner. But as he opened the trap to remove the bear, the old man gasped. The bear wasn't the only thing in there. Of all things, that huge char with the one eye that escaped him was also there. How strange. Purely by coincidence, that char must have swum into the trap during the flooding, but it should have died in all the dry weather after that. However, the fish before him now wasn't dried up at all. On the contrary, it looked like it had just come out of the stream. It was oddly beautiful. Before long, he came to understand that this was by far not a normal occurrence, and feeling like the fish was glaring at him, he suddenly grew frightened. Turning pale, he grabbed the fish and went down to the stream to put it back. "Go! Get out of here!" he yelled, although it didn't move. Once he let go of it, the fish floated on top of the water for a moment, before finally diving and disappearing into the depths. According to the old man, the next few days after that were a daze. I later heard from my family that when the old man returned home from the trap empty-handed, his family asked him what happened, but he said nothing. With dead eyes, he drank some shochu, muttered something incomprehensible, and then fell asleep on his bed. At the time, I felt like my soul was being sucked out of my body, like I was losing my mind. It was like someone was angry at me for killing for fun. After that, he said, the old man stopped fishing for char ever again. Two friends play in a forbidden cave and stumble across the very reason why they were told never to play there. Of course. But this time, at least one of them isn't making it out alive. Find out why in Kobito's Gift. When I was in elementary school, I lived near the beach in Aomori. Ever since I was young, I often played at the beach, but for 1 week a year, or maybe it was just 5 days, we were forbidden to play there in the evenings. However, during New Year's Eve when I was in the 3rd grade, my parents were busy with end-of-year preparations, so I was bored and went to the beach with one of my friends. This was the time of year where we weren't allowed to go there during the evening. There was a small cave in the nearby rocks, and we always treated that area like our secret base. We played with fireworks in there, read comics, etc. We played there again on this particular day too, but this time we ran into something strange. A kobito, a tiny person. This kobito had only one eye and seemed to have a few friends with him. I don't know if I should call them friends though. They were kind of like pets in the shape of a person, and they were making strange grinding noises, almost like they didn't have any reason. But the kobito at the front, the one with only one eye, seemed rather normal and held out a beautiful stone for us. For some reason, I wasn't afraid, and the two of us were super excited, like, oh my god, we found an amazing creature. I went to take the stone, but before I knew it, the kobito was gone. I looked around for him but couldn't find him, so I gave up. Then we got into a fight over the stone. It turned out that my friend had already taken the stone, but he refused to show it to me. There was nothing else I could do. I was extremely annoyed. That stone was meant for me, so the next time I see him, I'll make him give it to me, I thought as I walked home. But that night, my friend passed away. He broke out into a high fever, and the next morning, he stopped breathing. I was just small at the time, so I didn't hear the full details. Our parents didn't know that we went to the beach, but I think my friend died because of that stone from the Kobito. And if I had brought that stone back instead of him, then I have no doubt that I would have died instead. A mountain climber who ends up descending much later than intended stumbles upon something unusual on his way down. Is it a ghost, a yokai, or something else? Find out in Wife in the Mountain Hut. I enjoy mountain climbing, and I visit all sorts of places by myself. While I was climbing the mountain, the sole of my boots came off, and so by the time I managed to head back down, the sun had already set. And so, I planned to take the evening cable car from the environmental center at the descent point. With just my bell to keep the bears away, I made my way alone down the mountain. I didn't run into anything, and it was rather lonely amongst all the rocky terrain. Around the time my surroundings got pitch black, I finally reached a hot spring just 1 kilometer from the foot of the mountain. Normally, it was a place that climbers would stop to rest their feet. Everyone had already gone down for the night, so I figured I'd drop by myself and made my way over with torch in hand. But there, I found a woman sitting on the rocks. She was entirely naked. I broke out in goosebumps. Why on earth was a person here at this time of night? The area surrounding the mountain was a national park, so nobody lived nearby. And supposing someone did, the only people around were the men from the environmental center. And again, supposing that there was a woman around to begin with, there was no way she'd bathe here naked with all the bears around. When my torchlight hit her, the woman lifted her head. Forgetting all about the pain in my legs, I ran all the way to the environmental center. When I got there, they checked the list and confirmed that I was the last person to arrive. Everyone else had already gone back to the foot of the mountain. They told me that I must have been seeing things because I was in such a rush. But still doubting myself, I borrowed a sleeping bag and waited for morning. They also told me off for being so late and not having all the proper equipment for my climb. The next day, I mentioned what I saw to a gathering of climbers. "Huh? Don't you know?" one of the men replied. "Know what?" I asked. Apparently, 40 years earlier, a married couple lived in the environmental center, which, at the time, was just a mountain hut. They didn't have any children, but they got along well and lived a happy life. It wasn't like the hut didn't have a bath, but every now and then, the wife, who was a tough woman, liked to head to the hot spring to bathe. But one day, she said she was heading to the hot spring and then never returned. Her husband continued to live in the hut, but then it was bought out and they planned to install a cable car there. So he moved to the foot of the mountain and started working at a hot spring there until he retired. "So, you're saying I saw that woman's ghost?" I asked. But I got a terrifying reply in return. "No. According to her husband, she's still alive on the mountain somewhere. When he gets drunk, he goes on about how nobody believes him, but he knows it to be true. I don't think the young folks working there know about it these days though. But a few times a year, I hear about someone seeing her at that hot spring, or someone finding strands of her hair there. That's why the older folks who know the story think that it might be her. If you think about it ordinarily, it's an unbelievable story, right? But if not, what did I see then? A ghost? I don't want to believe either answer. By the way, this mountain is in the Tohoku region. If anyone knows anything about it, I'd love to hear more. Some friends from Tokyo visit the Tohoku region for a little get-together, but out in the mountains they discover something that will change their lives forever. Find out what in Thing in the Bare Trees. This is my friend's story from 10 years ago. He worked on a farm in an area near the Tohoku region. One day, as spring approached, 2 friends came to visit him from Tokyo. My friend wanted to cut some nice whiskey to drink, so he said they should get some fresh spring water from a nearby mountain. With a container in hand, the 3 men started climbing through the snow. Once they had gotten some water, the 3 started walking back. But then suddenly, one of them stopped and silently pointed at something between the bare trees. There, amongst those bare trees, was something strangely black. It seemed to be trembling and squirming. My friend thought it was a bear, but it was a little small to be a bear, and its movements were odd. Not only that, the fur covering its body looked just like seaweed. He found it strange, but if it really was a bear, then he didn't want to provoke it, so they had to run away quickly somehow. But then, one of his friends went pale like a dead man. He screamed, screwing up his face and vomiting everywhere. My friend and their other friend abandoned the water container and ran back down the mountain, dragging their friend with them. When they finally got back, their friend was still pale and trembling. He was muttering something that sounded like excuses to someone, and he refused to look anyone in the eye. At any rate, they put him to bed, made him rest, and decided they'd take him to the hospital the next day. But as soon as they took their eyes off him, that friend disappeared and went missing. They informed the police that he was gone, but they were never able to find him either, nor did his wife hear from him. But a few days later, they received information that their friend had been found. I won't go into details of what happened after that, but he wasn't exactly in the best shape, nor was he able to hold a regular conversation either. That friend who lost his mind came from a certain prefecture. His wife divorced him, and he was taken in by relatives, without his sanity ever returning. Finally this week, a local tale from the 1800s tells of how one man seemingly became an oni that the locals were forced to hunt. It's a tale that's still told to this day, but how much truth is there to it? Find out in The Man Who Became an Oni. June 8th, in the 12th year of Bunsei, 1829. The Tono Nambu clan announced there was to be a mountain hunt. This large-scale hunt was led by Tateno Takeishiemon, a local hunter, and gathered many of the samurai, villagers, and even farmers living in the area. They were heading up to a mountain to destroy an Oni. The Nambu clan was divided into several smaller clans, and of those, the Tono led a small yet prosperous castle town. Here, a certain samurai lived. According to one theory, this samurai was the uncle of the Nambu lord, so he was no doubt a samurai who shared in the Nambu name. One day, this samurai went mad for some reason and drew his sword. He then started cutting people down. The daimyo, greatly troubled by this, ordered him confined to his house, but the man escaped and fled to the mountains. As he walked from mountain to mountain, the man lost all sense of reason. But then, it was as though he occasionally remembered what he was doing, and he would descend to start attacking people like an Oni once again. Being that he had lost his mind, his actions were unpredictable, and the people greatly feared him. One day, reliable information came in that the samurai had fled to a mountain in my town. This was reported to the Tono Nambu clan, and the lord gave the order to kill him. It was Tateno Takeishiemon himself who received the order from the lord to command the forces necessary to destroy him. Takeishiemon was the most famous hunter in the village. He possessed both the physique, experience, and courage necessary to deal with mountain beasts. He was also an expert at using the matchlock, and in recognition of his bravery, the Nambu lord even made him a samurai. But this time, their target was an Oni. Even with his pedigree, they feared their chances of success were only 50-50. Shortly before they set out, he appealed to all the hunters to bring whatever weapons they had on hand. "Thank you all for your service today. Please take the utmost care. If you find yourself facing him, you must stand firm, or you will be in great danger. While he may be mad, he is still an expert at martial arts and must not be allowed to escape. I intend to kill him with a single shot, but should I miss, I will not be able to ask forgiveness of our Lord. I ask you all to do your best." And with that, the hunt began. Before long, Takeishiemon received news that they had discovered the samurai's location. His men had found him atop something they called the Tatami Stone, which, as it sounded, was a large, flat stone. Takeishiemon gathered his men, and they set off for the Tatami Stone at once. As they got near, they saw a figure on top of the stone. However, that figure was far too ghastly to be called human. The madman's hair had grown long and unchecked, and his fine kimono torn to shreds, a shadow of its former self as it clung to his body. His beard was also long and bushy, and it was his eyes alone that sparkled brightly. And atop that flat stone, he was chewing a snake he had caught from somewhere. The man looked the very definition of the word demon. The men were horrified by the sight of the mad samurai, but Takeishiemon took the lead and approached the stone. Once he was close enough to shoot him with his matchlock, he quietly aimed and then fired. "Who's there? How rude!" That was the only thing the mad samurai said. The single shot found its mark, and the samurai staggered before falling back and ceasing all movement. The men shouted in triumph and approached the mad samurai, but then they all fell silent. The samurai was absolutely massive, and so muscular that his body could no longer possibly be human. As he fled from mountain to mountain, he had completely become a monster. At any rate, having defeated the demon, Takeishiemon let the Nambu lord know that it was over, and the hunt was concluded. The mad samurai had committed far too many crimes to be buried in his family cemetery, and so the peasants respectfully buried him at the foot of a mountain called Hikage. A memorial stone was also placed there as a tribute for the samurai who had lost his mind. The residents later erected a Buddhist spire for him and prayed for his soul. They called it the Wheel Spire because it had a wheel attached that they could spin around and around to pray for his speedy rebirth. And so, on occasion, people would spin the wheel and pray for the samurai's soul. Even today, the people who live near that spire still pray for him during the Obon season. His grave also remains, but the inscription on his memorial stone can no longer be read, perhaps due to weathering over the years. The way this is written might make it sound fake, but this is part of the actual history of my hometown. This post might be moving slightly away from the true intentions of this thread, but this is still about an Oni that appeared in history. This might actually be the reason that some people become Oni. A big thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Just Sawn and Emerald. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Daikon, the Most Haunted Locations in Japan Volume 3, out on Amazon right now. And check out our merchandise store at kawabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kawabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kawabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Tara A. Devlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KawabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kawabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kawabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kawabana.net now.